Welcome to the Barry Foster Show, now on YouTube, originating from the Ridge Floor Studios in the City of Charm, beautiful downtown Avon Park. I'd like to remind you that if you have any thoughts, ideas, or suggestions for the program, the topics you'd like us to broach, or guests you'd like us to have on, just drop us a line at thebarryfostershow@gmail.com. Check out the YouTube page here at The Barry Foster Show. We're going to be putting up new programming. The goal is Monday through Friday, regularly new programming. And subscribe to our YouTube page and join our pages of The Barry Foster Show on Facebook and Instagram. That would be very helpful. If you would like to become a sponsor, we're going to have 4 sponsors, and we have an introductory offer going on now. Send us an email at thebarryfostershow@gmail.com, and we'll get that taken care of. In the studios this morning, John Larsen.
Good morning.
Good morning, John. How you doing?
Well, the world is off to a rising start. We saw some of that this morning early from Israel and so on, and that's going to be the news of the day for a couple of days anyhow, and so on. But, they just released the 20 live hostages that they had, all right? But they have not released the dead hostages, whether that's whether that's going to happen or not, because those families deserve closure also. So they know that they're no longer on this earth, but they want their body back so they can
bury them.
Yes, bury them, absolutely. But there was something that I found the other day which was enlightening but scary, and the headline was, "Shocking Poll, Young Americans Want Far Left Policies and a Socialist President." And here is this fellow by the name of Donald Kindle. He has a podcast called Justin and Donald Save America, and so on. And he's the Donald, not the Donald that we think of, but he's the Donald. But anyhow, each week we dig in the biggest threats facing the country, expose the agendas behind them, and give you the truth you won't hear anywhere else. And in our latest episode, we reveal the shocking results of a new poll conducted by Rasmussen, which is a pretty reputable firm, and Heartland Institute. The results are clear and deeply troubling. 76% of young Americans support nationalizing major industries like healthcare, energy, and big tech, nationalizing them. 55% support confiscating America's excess wealth, whatever that is, to give young people money for homes. 40% want fines, community service, or even jail time for refusing to use someone's preferred pronouns. More than half would hand authority over the Supreme Court to the presidency of the United Nations. Now, this is pretty scary tough, and this is young people that they poll.
Do we know what age area we're talking about when they say young people are 18, 20?
I would say that it probably goes to like 35, but
Okay.
that's just my guess. It doesn't specifically say that here. But, I mean, young people, and again, I think it's a result of indoctrination through school, primarily schools, and maybe some radicalization at home, but I would say almost always it comes from the education that they're not receiving and the hatred they receive for this country in their schooling.
And this is why there was such a big push for free college, because the colleges, and we heard Charlie Kirk talk about this, that they're really indoctrination zones.
Yes,
they are not.
Absolutely.
They are not. They're not the free exchange of ideas that they were once upon a long time ago when I went to school. There was some discussion, but even then it was pretty. You either had to knuckle under to what the professor wanted, or you didn't get the grade. So yeah, and this is why it's going to be up to us to do some re-education of these young people. And I know, and we've talked about this at the Tea Party, because it's going to be up to the grandparents, because it's the kind of thing that youngsters need to learn how to do for themselves. And I saw this thing the other day. I'm on a lot of social media, and there was a pizza chain up in Lakeland that closed down. And the reason they closed down is they couldn't find anybody to work. Mm-hmm. They couldn't find kids who would make the pizzas or deliver the pizzas, and they're not the only ones that have had this problem with our young people as in the workforce. And at some point, they're going to have to be taught what the Apostle Paul told us: "He who does not work, neither should he eat."
Right.
And
we've seen that in a number of, even here locally, we've seen it in a number of restaurants that used to be 3 meals a day. And years ago, maybe part of it was COVID, but also a lack of help, they cut back to 2 meals a day, breakfast and lunch. And there's a number of restaurants here that do that nowadays. They no longer serve dinner because they can't get people to work, if you will, the night shift, okay, and so on. So that's the unfortunate part. And again, I think it's the indoctrination that kids received in school that, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. So when you hear that for 12 years, or let's say even longer if you go on to college, and you really hear it more in college, but also in high school, and I think also to some degree in grade school, and so on. They just indoctrinate these kids, and these kids believe what they're being told, and that is that, corporations are bad, government is bad, business is bad, and so you shouldn't have anything to do with that.
And they made it very difficult for small businesses to get kids in, to teach them how to work. And I'll give you our sponsor, Ridge Forest. Now, Roberts was during the summer would always hire some local kids, and they had driver's license, so they would deliver flowers, or they could work the desk for a while, or and they would come in, and she'd be able to pay them a small salary, but the idea was to teach them how to get the work ethic.
Right.
And as they continued to raise the minimum wage and mandate who got it, she couldn't do that anymore. She says, Barry, I cannot hire a couple, 3 kids at $15 an hour
right.
to deliver flowers. I just can't do it.
Right.
And so they have made that very. My first job was $1 an hour. Okay, and at first I worked a fast food restaurant. I worked in a fast food restaurant. I got my fill of that pretty quick. And then I went to work for a department store. I worked in the boys department, and I was 16. I looked like I was about 8. I was always had a baby face. But you went in, and the idea was you learned how to work, you learned how to follow orders, you learned how to do what you needed to do. So as you went up the food chain, you would have that work ethic, and you can't get kids to do that anymore because the government will pay them to stay home.
Oh yeah, that's the problem. And the other thing is they've really been, in their thought process, they've been indoctrinated to the point where they think that, work is something I don't need to do. It's the government should provide for me. It's like this poll, what it says right here. All right, when it says that 55% support confiscating Americans' excess wealth to give young people money for homes. So there it is, right there in that 55% column. That tells you the mindset of over half of these kids, young people that they interviewed and polled, and that is the excess wealth from whoever and however much that is. I guess if you have 1,000, they want to take 900. I don't know. But I mean, they believe that their house should come from you, not from their work, not from their effort, but from somebody else.
And that is the Christian work ethic, which they've done a great job in knocking Christianity out of schools, and even the Christian work ethic, as the Apostle Paul says, he does not work, neither should he eat. And he talks about as a pastor, he would go around, and he was also a tent maker. So he would make tents so that he wouldn't be a burden on the churches that he was starting. He wouldn't expect them to pay him for his work, although he said, a man is worthy of his hire. That he does, if he's going to work, if he's going to be a pastor, he should be paid to be the pastor because that's what he does.
Right.
And so at any rate, these young people don't have, and we've seen them on the internet crying because they've had to work an 8-hour day and they just can't take it. That's so much work. I go, darling, you got no idea.
Well, you see these videos today, especially in light of the cutback that the government's making, and people that don't deserve to get what they're getting from the government. Finally, the administration has stepped up and said, time out. We're no longer going to give all that money away. So these people that had, my food stamps have been cut back by 40%, 50%, whatever. Number one, you're able-bodied. They're saying now, if you want to continue to get even your 50% reduction in food stamps, you're going to have to work at least 20 hours a week. Oh my gosh, that's horrible. Me, work? I've never worked.
If you're in the state of Florida, you put in these words on www.careersource, then where you live. Like here where John and I are, it's Highlands County. You put in Career Source Highlands, it'll come up Career Source Heartland. Okay, if you are in Lake Wales, just up the road, and you put in Career Source Lake Wales, it'll Career Source Polk. And there are, I think, we did an interview back here, if you want to search back for Donna Doubleday, who is the local head, and they will take, you go in, this comes at no charge to you. You go in, you tell them what kind of job you're looking for, what your qualifications are. They will help match you up with a local employer, get you over there, and get you a living wage. Okay, and now if you're in other states, I don't know how it works in Pennsylvania, Ohio, New York, New Jersey, Indiana, whatever. But in Florida, you can do that, and there are organizations that will get you a job and get you to work. Wanting to go to work, I have. My dad used to say, "Find a job you love. You never have to work another day in your life."
He's
Okay,
right.
and if you're fortunate enough to get a job doing the thing that you love, your work becomes a joy. But sometimes you just got to put parsnips on the table.
Yep. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And yeah, like you said, when I started out, my first job, and I've told this many times, I hustled newspapers for 5 years. All right. But then as I got to be a teenager and above, I got a job working in a drugstore. I worked cleaning a bank. I then worked at a department store like you did, right? And whatnot. So there was all of those things until I finally got my first job in a factory, which started at $3.50 an hour in 1959. Okay?
And that's pretty good money.
In a factory. Well, it was money. Let's put it that way. Okay, it was better. It was better than what I was making, and whatnot. So that was the beginning of it. And then industry, I found I loved industry, and I try to absorb all the information and all the education I could get from it, and then take it on from there, and so on. So yeah,
we are at the taping of this, or the recording of this program, coming up on what I refer to as the holidays, and I only say happy holidays probably from the middle of October to the middle of November. After that, it turns into Merry Christmas. But the holidays are Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. Okay, and we were talking the other day, and I'm going to I think I'm going to do a podcast with our pastor, because as a Christian, I have angled away from Halloween. Halloween is not a holiday that we really celebrate that much anymore because of the underlying theme of it. But he pointed out on Sunday that this is a time that you don't have to go out and evangelize. That they will come to you. And so when they come for trick-or-treating, you can hand out a child-oriented tract with your Baby Ruth candy bar or whatever you're going to be giving away to the little goblins that come forward. What I used to think was a fairly harmless holiday has turned into something much different. But after Halloween, you have Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, and that whole time is a time for friends and family to get together to have different kinds of parties, dinners, gathering, and it's time to, when you see a young person, kind of gravitate that way and just ask them questions. And I would say through the Socratic method, I would take some of these questions here and say, what are you going to be when you grow up? I always say, makes them laugh. What are you going to be when you grow up? Well, I want to do this. I want to do that. I talked to a girl who wanted to be a veterinarian. And I said, well, what kind of animals do you want? Well, just the cute ones. Well, okay.
Then she's never watched Dr. Pol.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever watched Dr. Pol.
No,
Oh,
I
my
never
God.
have.
He's a veterinarian, older fella, okay? But he has a practice, I think it's in Kansas. He takes on any kind of animal you've ever imagined. Either people bring it to him or he does house calls.
Oh, yeah.
And he'll go out
Hard
into
to bring
the
a
field.
cow in.
He'll
Yeah.
go out in the field, and I'll tell you, I used to watch him, and you learn so much from him. I didn't realize that things like birthing a calf and that can be so difficult, but it can really, really be difficult sometimes, and so
Is
on.
that
So
right?
it's if she ever wanted to be a veterinarian, that's the show she needs to watch. Absolutely.
So you get to talking to them a little bit.
Yes.
About the way that life is, and you say I don't know. I don't know what you've been told, okay? But this is the kind of way things and begin to engage them in pleasant conversation. They say that you shouldn't, when you get to these family gatherings, talk about politics or religion.
Right.
And that's because people haven't been able to talk about them in a rational manner. Charlie Kirk has been, if you have not seen him, you need to watch some of them to understand how to have a little bit of back and forth with them. And sometimes I'll ask you questions you can't answer. Well, fortunately now, we all have these smartphones,
Yep.
and you can well, let's look that up. That's interesting. Can you show that to me? Let's talk and begin to show them there are many ways of thinking and many ways of digesting these problems, and it's time for us to begin to turn some of these family gatherings, because now is the time, and then there comes another time, which I call the high holy days of patriotism, which runs from Memorial Day to the end of Independence Day, where you have other family gatherings and that kind of thing. But it's time for us to begin to research some of these kids and find out what kind of a bill of goods, and it's really going to be hard to not get mad. Okay, it's going to be hard to not get mad.
Yep. Well, the other thing we can see today, too, with what's going on with World of Ice and what they're trying to do, they are literally trying to get the bad people off of the street, the people that are illegally here in this country but have committed crimes and so on. So they're in the process of doing that. But the backlash they're getting, especially in Chicago, oh my gosh, it's horrible, horrible. And luckily, there's been some ICE agents that have been injured, but luckily there hasn't been any casualties. But, I mean, you can see the violence in Chicago especially, and in L.A. I mean, it is really off the chart. But, I mean, they've got to do something. And Trump, that was his big push, and his big thing that he said before he ran for office this time was, we're going to get the illegals out of here. Now, so far, they've gotten, meaning ICE, I think, have gotten and deported or jailed or whatever, over 1 million. And I think they say that approximately 1 million have self-deported. So if those numbers are correct, we're somewhere around 2.5 million. But what Joe Biden let into the country was somewhere between 12 and 15 million people.
And they're moving now to not only the people who have committed crimes in the United States, but the people who've come into the United States and have not been involved in criminal activity, but they did commit a crime coming in illegally. Right. And the thing is when we talk about some of these things, understand that these kids have been fed a steady diet of the fact that people who like Trump are fascists, and that fascists deserve to die. We talked a little bit yesterday about the guy from Jay Jones from Virginia, and some of these other people calling for death. And you have to kind of let the kids know that. And Victor Davis Hanson has a great little program about this, because fascism is really a left-wing idea. Now they've been told it's a right-wing idea, and when you ask them, and you tell them, I know this is counterintuitive, but Donald Trump is reducing regulations. Fascism is where they have private ownership of businesses, but the government has so many regulations, they, for all intents and purposes, control that industry. It would be like you have private ownership of the automobile industry, but the cars have to be made this big, they have to get this much gas mileage, they can't be over this, they can't be under that, and by the regulations, they really can only turn out a certain product. They can't turn out any kind of product that they want. It's all under regulation. So you have to, number one, show them what they have been told may not be accurate, and you may want to look this up for yourself, and you get these kids to begin to unpack this and let them talk about, the Roe v. Wade, for instance. What Donald Trump did, he did not outlaw abortion. He turned it back over to the states. And did you know that that's in the Constitution? What, abortion? No, not abortion. But the right to abortion is really a state's issue. And really, because I would say that if you ask even some adults what the three branches of government are, they'd be like Republican, Democrat, and I don't know what. They have no idea about executive, legislative, and judicial. They have no idea about this stuff. And some of this is going to take some rudimentary discussion, and maybe even getting someone's email address or their instant message, because a lot of kids have Facebook only for their grandparents. But it's going to be up to us to begin to kind of ask these kids questions and say, well, it's good to question things. I'm glad you're answering questions, asking questions. I have questions of my own.
Well, one thing, going back a minute to that Fred brought out in his interview on Saturday at the Sea Service Museum, was that he would wish that the schools would conduct more field trips to the Sea Service Museum.
Amen.
So the young people could learn about the military, about what the conflicts we've been into, what the cost of it was, not only in the dollar cost, but also the humanitarian cost, and so on. So I really believe, and if I ever get a chance, I'm going to talk to some folks that we know that are associated with the schools, and see if we can't get the bug in their ear that, hey, look, why don't the schools conduct more field trips for the young kids to this museum where they can learn some things?
Yeah, it's right there at the corner of Roseland and Kenilworth Boulevard, just up the street from the Sebring High School.
Yeah.
The number, if you need it, is 863-385-0992. They're open Wednesday through Saturday, noon to 4. But I would say that homeschools would be good. Mm-hmm. Also, if you have a Boy Scout troop, mm-hmm. or a Trail Life troop, or if you have a church youth group of some description, mm-hmm. That you can call them up, and they will have a docent kind of guide you through it and show these kids mm-hmm. what they're looking at. But that is one of the many museums in Highlands County. It would be good for kids to tour.
Oh, absolutely. And again, it's a free service. They're open, like I said, if you talk school days, they're open 3 days that are school days where, these field trips could be conducted. And I think it'd just be a great way for young people, because they either don't know much about the military or know very little or have never been exposed to it, but would be a good way for them to appreciate the sacrifice that tens of thousands of people have made to save this country from tyranny or whatever.
And I would suggest that if you have not heard, I would suggest you could do an internet search for Rush Limbaugh, The Story of Thanksgiving, mm-hmm. and listen to that a couple, 3, 4 times, okay? So that when Thanksgiving comes up, you can recount the story of Thanksgiving and how things happen. I remember when my granddaughter was very young, we got together for Thanksgiving dinner. I said, I bet you've been learning about the Pilgrims. And she squinted. I said, how did you know that? I said, well, this is the time of year that they talk about this kind
right.
of things.
Yep.
And I said, did you know that the Pilgrims came here to spread the story of Jesus Christ? And there was a total blank look. And I said, yeah. I said, there's a thing. You remember the name of the ship? Oh, the Mayflower. Oh, she knew the Mayflower. Well, there's a thing called the Mayflower Compact. Okay? And like the compact that your mom uses for makeup? Well, she kind of knew about that. I said, well, this is a different kind of compact. It's an agreement. But if you look up the Mayflower Compact, you will find out why the Pilgrims wrote down why they came. Mm-hmm. Really? Yes, they did. But I would say that beginning with some very rudimentary things like that, and they'd say, well, where did you get that? And they'd say, well, this is where I heard this story, and I can tell you that this comes from a guy whose accuracy rating is 99.8%. So 0.2% he's wrong, mm-hmm. okay? 99.8% he's right. And I can tell you that you can say what you want to about Rush Limbaugh, but he did exhaustive research. Mm-hmm. And so this is a true story, and feel free to look it up. Feel free to look it up and see how this came to be. All right? So it's time for us to begin to reach out to these young people and try at some level. And you may find some pretty hard-boiled kids, But if you talk to them and just ask them questions, and you got to let them blow off steam for a while. It's like the guy who you ask him about his favorite football team who's like 2-8 for the season. You got to let him blow off some steam before you can really talk about things, mm-hmm. So, but it's going to be up to us to reach out to these young people and just have some. If you show interest in what they like and what they're doing, and saying, well, can you tell me a little bit about this? Like, I knew I had a young person in my life who was into this thing called scream rock. I said, well, can you tell me what that is? Who are some of the bands that I didn't grow up, the bands that I grew up with, you probably never heard of, like the Yardbirds and Led Zeppelin and things like that, the Byrds. But you probably have, so I haven't heard of these young bands. So who are some of the bands that play? And if you show some interest and try at some level to find some common ground, then you can make some progress. It may take a while because some of these kids have been, as you point out, very ingrained in, I think probably as far back as elementary school. Now you see these elementary school teachers that have pride flags in their classrooms. Now where we live, there are no, that we are aware of,
Right.
there are no pride flags. They're all American flags.
Yep.
And they all say the Pledge of Allegiance every morning. We live in a very rural area.
Right.
Okay, so
Yep.
for some of this, it's going to require us to reach out and talk. And some of these, now you had a 3-year-old. He hated Trump. He didn't know why, but
Right.
he hated Trump.
Oh yeah, yep, and whatnot. There was no reason except that I think she had been watching so much anti-Trump on TV, right? That's where it came from. And so
yes.
that's where it came from, right there, and so on. And I can see that in other folks that I know that absolutely hate Trump. And when I ask them, why? They can't really, and I'll say, well, you drive a big pickup truck, and I know what you pay for gas where you live. I said, but the prices come down a fair amount. And why did that happen? Well, I don't know why it happened. I said, well, do you think the current administration had anything to do with it? Well, maybe, I guess. Is that a good thing? Well, yeah, that's a good thing. And so on. So they don't have an argument, okay, that they can back up with anything. It's just what is up here and what they've been ingrained with from either watching television, getting it from other people. Because I'm assuming that people in the, I hate Trump syndrome hang out with other people that are I hate Trump syndrome. So they're compatible with those folks. So they believe that by getting that compatibility from someone else, it reinforces their hatred. And so it's easy for them to say, oh, I know a bunch of people that hate Donald Trump. Okay, all right. That's your given right. You can do that, all right? But there's no real facts behind it. If your life is better, you have to take a look at what made your life better. Well, what made my life better was the current administration versus the one previously.
And the thing is, and we talked about this a little earlier, but they have a steady stream of people saying that ICE is the new Gestapo.
Oh, yeah.
They're snatching people off the streets for no
Right.
reason.
Yep.
And they have no backup for this. So, well, can you tell me where that happened? Well, no, but that's what they said. Well, yeah, that may be what they said, but is it right? And it sadly now, we can get, when I grew up, and I've told this story again, I'll give the Reader's Digest version. In my grandparents' town, there were 2 newspapers. One was the Democrat newspaper, and one was the Republican newspaper. Okay, and I learned this at a very early age when my grandfather told me to go down and get him a paper. And so he gave me a nickel, I think, whatever it was. And I went down, and there were some newspapers, and there was a little pile of change on the top, and I put my dime down and took a newspaper and brought it back. And he said, Barry, we don't have that paper in our house. And he told me that, he says, here's a dime. He says, I want you to get, and he told me the name of the newspaper. And so I went down. Well, that wasn't the paper that I'd gotten. So I went in and I said, do you have this paper? Well, no, that they had it next door. So I went down and got him a copy of that paper. And then everything was fine. And now we have our choice of news. We can watch One American News or Newsmax, which is more on the conservative side. Or you can watch MSNBC, or ABC, NBC, CBS, which are all on the liberal side. And if you want to get a good balanced view, you've got to kind of watch them both, because and decide what's right and what's not right, because it takes some unraveling. It was only about less than 100 years ago that the idea of fair and balanced stories came out. It was Associated Press, and they were going to give balanced stories. And there's two thoughts. One is where you present both sides of the story in one article, and the other is you present one article that's right-wing and one article that's left-wing. And then you read both articles and kind of figure out what you like or don't like in the middle. And but it's now where if you want to find out what's going on, it takes some unraveling to really determine what's really happening.
Yeah, I think you have to, and again, most of us feel a comfort in talking with and associating with and listening to people that think like we do. It just makes life a lot easier. Yeah, you could sit there. I could watch the anti-Trump channel all day long, but all I would get out of it would be more frustration because I think they don't see the light of day the way I see it. And so I listen and watch to things that make me feel good, and they support what I think, what I say, and so on. And that makes life a lot easier. So
birds of a feather and all that?
Sure, absolutely. And I assume the other side of the aisle, if you will, does the same thing. They listen, watch, see things that they feel comfortable with, and that's their life.
Well, but sometimes we have to go and find uncomfortable things to find out what we need to do. And I've discovered this guy. He originated on TikTok, which I won't watch because I believe it's run by the Chinese, no matter what they say. But he has moved now to Facebook Reels and other things. And his name is Ian. I don't know his last name, but his site is called CancelThisCompany.com. And he has gone and done exhaustive research into what companies own the consumer goods that we buy. And he's gone into everything. He's gone to the soft drink aisle. He's gone to the makeup aisle. He's gone to the cereal aisle. He's gone to the laundry detergent aisle. He goes down, and for people our age, you got to get by some of his language. Some of his language I find really, really difficult. Okay, but his conclusions are the same. His first name is Ian. And he's now starting this new app called Buyer. That's BUY''R. It's Buyer app, and it's what they call the beta stage or the testing stage. And spoiler alert, but I can tell you that most everything we buy is owned by mostly 3 companies. Okay, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. Okay, that own that. And he's gone through and shown who owns these things. And then he says, if you want to find the family-owned and operated things, he says, on the aisle, you look in the corners. Like in the cereal aisle, you look in the corners. But he was talking about things that you would think were family-owned, but have since been bought out. Like there's this organic toothpaste and dental products called Tom's, TOM''S. And he said, oh, yeah, that's family-owned, right? No. For a while back, it was bought out by Colgate-Palmolive. But they kept the same packaging. I mean, it still looks the same. And as he goes through, he says, if you look at it, and he's gone to a lot of effort to say, oh, this is owned by this family or that family, and here they are, and here are the people you're dealing with there. But for the most part, most everything in the grocery mart is what he's been looking at, is owned by 3 companies. But then he says those companies are owned by us because they're using retirement money. They're using our retirement money. And if we don't want to invest in that stuff, we can, if we all got together, do something about it. He says we have the ability, but it's going to take a lot of us doing something. And he's talked about a number of things along those lines, like he got into the stock market, which I didn't, I'm not into. But he says that there's this one company called GameStop, and what they have done with other companies is they have bought they bought the stock, they've taken the company down to where the stock's almost worth nothing. Then they buy up all the shares, and as it comes up, they make tons of money. Or if it goes out of business, they make tons of money. And he explains how this works. I don't know how it works. But apparently there's this one company called GameStop, and the people that own the majority of the shares, they're not selling. And the people who bought these at the high price are now kind of stuck. They're kind of stuck. And he said if they wanted to do something, they could collapse the entire stock market. All these people who bought on short sales. I don't understand how this works, but he understands how this works. And as he explains it with great joy, he had about the same level of joy that Charlie Kirk has when he talks about this stuff. He smiles and he is enthusiastic about the things that he's found. And but the company, it's called CancelThisCompany.com, and his first name is Ian. And now I follow him, so I see this stuff all the time. But it's going to be up to us to talk to the kids about this, saying, you may be concentrating in on these politicians like Donald Trump, for instance. But did you know that your life is really run by these giant corporations? And whatever cereal you buy, whether it's Post Toasties or Kellogg's Raisin Bran or General Mills or whatever, it's all owned by the same people. It's different. You have this illusion that you have a choice, but you really have like no choice. And this is why Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, as we begin to come in contact with these kids, Halloween's going to be the first up. And Sandra and I have not participated in Halloween for a long time.
Yeah.
We may participate in Halloween this year and find some child-oriented tracks that we can stick on Baby Ruth candy bars or whatever we give on. Sandra will find something that is not unhealthy. I don't know about healthy, at least not very unhealthy, to give out. And I think we may be, as they say, preaching to the choir in our neighborhood, but we got to start someplace.
I went on to this site, CancelThisCompany.com.
Yes.
And it lists, it goes right, I mean, it's got like, I'm going to say 35 categories of companies you can look up, broken down into entertainment, auto
movies.
parts, all of it, and so on. But I mean, the very beginning is the biggest tech tyrants, and they call them the worst. Amazon, Google, Apple, Facebook, Microsoft, and Twitter, okay? And so on. Then they go to social media, and then it goes just one category after another. So you can look
He's got spreadsheets.
Yeah, you can look up these companies, if you will, and it'll tell you what companies to avoid, all right, what companies not to do business with if you can help it. And it's CancelThisCompany.com, the one you had mentioned earlier.
Yes.
And so on. So it looks like it's got a lot of information on there about these various companies and so on. So, yes.
It's an interesting thing to watch, and it's why Sandra and I are trying as much as possible to move toward local. And we're gonna do a whole Made in USA thing. John and I are going to fix up a phone conversation here with somebody. But when we buy our beef, we go up into Frostproof. It's on 27. It's called the Chop Shop. And it's Baxter Troutman's locally grown beef, okay? And it doesn't have all the preservatives and additives and all that. And to be honest with you, I hate to say this because more people will go now and the price will go up, but it's less expensive than buying in the grocery mart. We go down to, and I have had a couple of coffee programs with Steve Slaybaugh over at Strangely Warmed Coffee, who they import their beans from the different countries, from Nicaragua and Brazil, Peru, and Colombia. They roast their own beans. You can get a dark roast, you get a medium roast, whatever, and they do. But it's a local company, and we've tried more and more to move. The other day we went to Sarasota to the farmers market there, and we bought some locally grown produce there. And there's a place in Sarasota called Jessica's where we got some more locally grown produce where it's not. I think one thing that I would love to see is you call your representative, I'm going to call ours, and say we would like to see the Congress reinstate country of origin labeling on our produce.
Yep, we have a right to know where it comes from because there's probably no other country that ships food products into this country that have the investigatory, regulations that we have when it comes to food approval, USDA, Department of Agriculture, and so on. So if you look, like for beef, for instance, if you look at an advertisement, if they want to, and they would promote it, most of them do, they'll put down there, certified or whatever by USDA, United States Department of Agriculture,
Right.
just to prove that the meat that you're buying has been tested and whatnot. So, that's the degree of safety I think you get when you buy things in this country versus food that comes from who knows where.
And bioengineered food.
Oh, yeah.
As well, and
Yep.
what they allow and what they don't allow. Because I have heard conflicting reports about whether the Bill Gates, his formula called Appeal, which is kind of a preservative, but is really not necessarily good for you to eat, is not allowed on organic food. I don't know the answer to that question, and I'm on a Facebook page called Bioengineered Foods, and people show things that are very unusual. There's a lady that had cut an apple open, and it was supposed to be what a varietal called the pink lady, okay? But when she cut it open, the pink had bled down into the apple, and people said, no, that's not right. That's something, they've done something to that. It shouldn't.
Right.
It should be white on the inside. It shouldn't be pink on the inside. They shouldn't be bleeding down in. So there are things that you really have to look at. And you and I have both seen pictures of people in the at the beach in the 1970s, and people on the beach now, and they say, "What's the difference?" It says there were no fat people back then.
Waistline, yeah. You look at back in the 60s and 70s, the waistline of most people was like 28 to 32.
Yes.
All right, you look at most people on the beach today.
40
some
anyway.
Some people are wearing Speedos that should not wear a Speedo.
No,
okay?
they should only come in certain sizes. But the thing is, it's the stuff that they have been putting in and been allowed.
Right.
And
Yes.
we're starting to see more videos now say they don't allow that in Europe, but they
Right.
allow it here.
Right.
Why is that?
Right.
And I think that there's very insidious reasons that has been allowed.
Well, thank goodness that we now have Make America Healthy Again under RFK Jr. and Dr. Oz and others, of course, and so on. But he has brought to light, not in difference to the manufacturers, if you will, but let's face it, whether they did it knowingly or non-knowingly, they have been, I won't say it was poisoning, but I mean, affecting the health
Yes.
of the consumer by what they were allowed to put into the food and how they treated the food when it was still in the ground at the farms and so on. The fertilizers and pesticides that they were able to put on the food.
Well, there are stories about certain brands of potatoes that are used because they make great French fries, and they are sprayed with people wearing these hazmat suits, and they have to be allowed to sit idle for such and such a long time for that stuff to kind of wear off, because they don't want. When I worked for a fast food joint, we just got regular potatoes, and some of the not all French fries were created equal, but there are places who want to have a certain, and they use the word bouquet, a bouquet of French fries that stick up out of the holder that's very attractive, and people don't necessarily want to buy fruit that is not attractive. I don't care as long as it tastes good. I told that we had a lady who lived up in Polk County, and she had 9 acres of organic peaches. Half of them were cling peaches, and half of them were cling-free peaches. And we were there buying them, and she had a little box off the back of a box truck where she kept stuff in this cooler. I said, "What's in there?" She said, "Well, that's going to the hogs." I said, "I'm sorry, what?" She said, "That's going to the hogs." I said, "Why is it?" "Well, some of them have like blemishes on them, and people don't want to buy them." I said, "I got a knife at the house. I can cut the blemish off." And we got them for a song, and they were just as tasty. They were, and I will tell you this, that preparing your own food is not easy. We sat there, and my wife she cannot peel me 3 or 4 to 1, okay? I was trying there, and my hands were cramping up, and she's just going right along. We spent some time with her sister up in Tennessee, where they had picked some horrible amount of snap beans, and we were all sitting around talking, snapping beans, making little, and we picked blueberries. Okay, and we all tried to pick just the blue ones, but some red ones got in there, so we
Right.
went through, we sorted those back out again. It takes no small amount of effort to do this, but the benefits are so good, and the food tastes so much. I was astonished at how much better organic food tastes than the regular fare. I'm sorry,
Yep.
than the restaurant fare. I saw this meme, and it's true. It says, "We love to go out to eat, but the food's so much better at home." And thank goodness for RFK, they're, I think, trying to do the same thing with him that they were trying to do with Donald Trump, has outweighed him. Some of these changes are supposed to take place in 2027 and 2028. So they're trying to, we'll do these, and right at the end of the term, that'll change. I'm hoping that a Donald Trump-like president gets elected who will say, we're going to continue to doing the stuff we were doing before.
Well, I think if J.D. Vance gets elected, or even Marco Rubio, who's really, I think, done a great job, he's been a part of what's gone on in Israel. Okay, he's been a piece of it. He's been over there negotiating along with Jared Kushner and a couple others that Trump has sent over there. But I believe that one thing that Trump did this time, and not all of them, but a good share of his cabinet are business people.
Yes.
They're like-minded people like him. They built up a business from whatever to wherever it is today. And I think that has been a big piece of Trump's success this time, is having business people on his cabinet level positions.
Business people who love America.
Oh, absolutely. And I think they all pretty much say the same thing. They all sing the same song, if you will. Not that they're acolytes, but I think they come from the same world.
They come from the same cloth.
And they know what works.
Well, and the thing is, during his first administration, people would come to me sneering and saying, Trump is no conservative. Oh, you're right. Mm-hmm. He's not a conservative, okay? He's a businessman.
Right.
And he loves America, and he wants to see things run efficiently. Mm-hmm. But to say he's a conservative, I think, is a pretty good stretch. Okay, I don't think he's a conservative at all. He knows what the cost of doing business is, and he spent a lot of money on the military to put it back together. Because they said, "Sir, we don't have any bullets." He said, "Well, go get more bullets." He spends money where he needs to spend money, and I think that my personal opinion is Marco Rubio is a much better Secretary of State than he was a senator. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that when he toes the line set forward by the administration, he does a great job.
I think he's done a great job, and I think he's to be applauded for it. Now, what his ambitions are beyond that, when his time is up as the Secretary of State, I don't know. I assume he's going to make another run for the presidency, but somebody said something this morning, and boy, oh boy, did it make a lot of sense. They said, name me how many people in the Republican Party that are in the Trump cabinet or others today would make a good president. And you could rattle off a dozen names who would probably do a pretty good job. Then they said, name me any Democrat today that would make a good president. And there was dead silence, like nobody. Okay,
no.
Nobody, all right?
And it's going to be up to us, and that's why I have Kathy Chamberlain coming on later this week to talk about rules for rhinos, and it's going to be up to us to, and now is the time. We're working on Charlie Kirk's shirt tails. You have this Berlin Hollyhand, who's a young kid, and this Benny Johnson, and some of these other people that are picking up the mantle and support them to begin to engage some, especially the moderates, in a dialogue that says, look, we need to recoup this country. We need to recoup this country. And I personally would be glad to settle for a moderate Democrat that would work with the conservative Republicans to save the country, as opposed to one of these loud radicals getting in who wants it. And we heard it. They want to fundamentally transform the country. And I don't think anybody understood what that meant. what that meant was they wanted to transform it into a socialist country.
Right.
Yep.
Yep.
And socialism's all great until you have to live under it.
And it's great until you run out of other people's money.
Yes, Margaret Thatcher.
Margaret Thatcher, that's right. And she was absolutely correct, because the way the Democrats, Trump has tried to put controls in place now, and also with Doge. Thank goodness for Doge. And Doge, I think, needs to continue under all circumstances, but continue to Doge, bring down the cost and the waste and the fraud and the abuse that's taking place. When you watch some of these, and I've watched a lot, and I've mentioned it before, but I've watched a lot of these programs that are investigating the corruption in Minnesota. Just one state, Minnesota. The corruption in there is in the billions of dollars. Not the millions, billions of dollars, and so on. So, and that, I'm assuming that there are many, many states that are reminiscent of what's going on in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. So I think other states, if they could get the investigating into it. But I was watching something yesterday which really surprised me. In the state of Maine, there is so much corruption going on in the state of Maine right now, and there is no attorney general yet appointed by Donald Trump in the state of Maine, which is what the reasons are, whether it's being held up in the Senate as an appointed situation or not. But what's going on up there, and this was a big part of it, if you remember, the governor up there, Janet Mills, just went head-to-head with Donald Trump on taking girls out of boys' sports and
Title IX,
whatever. Yes, and so on. But the corruption beyond that in the state of Maine is unbelievable. Her brother is involved in one of these things, and I don't understand all this. The first time I've heard it was that I guess you can take, if you've got money, let's say dirty money that you want to hide, you give it to your lawyer, and your lawyer has a way, there's a way that is allowed, I guess, to put this money in a certain account that is unaccounted for. And then when you want that money, all right, you say to your lawyer, all right, I want that money sent to here or there, but they have to go through some legal ramifications. And this is where her brother, I guess, is a lawyer, has come into play. And they're selling up land in Maine to the Chinese to grow marijuana and other drugs, okay, and so on. So the more you hear about these things and the more investigation that's being done, the more dirty deeds come to the front, and you say, oh my gosh, how many places are there like this? But I think there's a lot. Oh,
there's a lot of this, and some of it came to light in Donald Trump's first debate, and there was an astonishing exchange. And I heard it, but listening to, there's a comedian by the name of Dave Chappelle, mm-hmm. who is he's a black guy, loved Hillary, and he was watching this debate, and Hillary accused Donald Trump of using all these things to enrich himself, all these laws and everything, mm-hmm. and Trump said, "Yeah, I use those." He says, "I use them." He says, "They made them there." He says, "But you know who else uses them? Hillary's donors and Obama's donors." He says, "If you don't want those things," he says, you can repeal those so that they're not there. But if they're there, yeah, I'm going to use them just like you use them." And Chappelle, watching the look on his face, he was astonished that a quote unquote politician would tell the truth. Mm-hmm. And he was, and it really changed his opinion about Hillary. And I don't know whether he voted for her or not. I don't remember that part. But I do know that when he watched that, he watched in utter amazement. So, yes, those things are going on. And for people to get in there and change those kinds of things, I don't know. I was watching a video with this guy who was talking about a guy in Washington who was going in to reform things. And he says, Washington's a very dangerous place for people to be playing games, okay? Because when you're talking about, as you say, billions of dollars, or maybe even more, hundreds of billions of dollars. And in this Cancel This Company, Ian shows pallets of money, that how much money these companies have. Their pallets as tall as some skyscrapers. And he shows one pallet, he goes, most Americans can work their whole life and not even make enough to fill one pallet.
Right.
Much less stacks of pallets that are equal to a skyscraper, okay? It's almost an unfathomable amount of money.
Well,
and when people stand to lose that much money, bad things can happen quickly.
Well, if you remember back when Obama sent pallets of money to Iran.
Yes.
Okay, and there's no knowing how much that was. I don't know how much it was.
Or where it went.
Right, and where it went. But no doubt it probably, a good portion of it was funneled into their nuclear program, which we then had to go over under this administration and destroy. Okay, so, yeah, you look at the insanity of that, giving almost your number one enemy, all right, billions of dollars, if you will, flying it over there on pallets in airplanes and giving it to them, and no accounting for it, no telling where. And they said that, well, it was all confiscated money that we were holding from Iran. Right. If you believe that, I've got a two-headed cow, I'll sell you.
Yeah, big
okay?
bridge. Got
right.
a big bridge.
Right. Absolutely.
And there's things, and I didn't get to any of these. There's things that are happening locally that we're going to have probably get into next week. One is the three issues that are going on in Avon Park, and there's something that smells really bad here.
Oh.
I have not unpacked it yet, but this whole thing about Garrett Anderson and his sister Brittany McGuire, that they've gone after them the third time, trying to find out that they've done something wrong with this Brickell building that had sat vacant for decades, and he brought it out of mothballs and has made it into something that's producing tax revenue, and they are going after him because they believe he did something wrong. There's a whole deal going on with the Avon Park Housing Authority, where the longtime head was just drummed out, and somebody from long ago in Avon Park has been instituted in there, and there's a whole big thing going up in the Avon Park City Council about that. And the Avon Park Airport and the Florida Airport Management. That's going on. Those are three huge things, and there's a bad aroma about this whole thing, and we're going to try to see if we can unpack that. Secondly, it will not be until, I think, 2 weeks from this week that the city of Sebring is going to put out their request for proposal for the golf course across from Harder Hall and see how that goes, because we've talked about the Blackman family believing that was going to be something they could do to make it into a golf resort. We're going to see what happens there.
Right.
And thirdly, something we haven't really talked about, but it's on the same plane as this, is in Lake Wales. There's a giant hotel. All the towns in Florida, the little towns, had a big grand hotel.
Right.
There was one up in Haines City, which is now it's now a dormitory for Landmark Christian School that are turning out preachers. But they've been working on the one in Lake Wales, which went dormant in around 1982. By the time I left Lake Wales, 82, 83, the Agape players left, and it's been vacant since then. And they have been trying. They've had probably a half dozen, about as many suitors as they had for Harder Hall. They had for the Wales build. Now, this time for sure, they're going to get together, and they have two proposals to revamp the Wales-built hotel. So that's going on up in our neighbor to the north up there, and we haven't had a chance to talk about any of those things. But there's a lot of local things happening as well.
Well, there are always local things that are happening, and so on. So it's and it doesn't get the amount of play in it sometimes that the federal stuff does, because it's the federal stuff impacts a lot more people, and it impacts in a lot bigger way financially than the local stuff does. But you're right. I mean, within the confines of where you're located, there are things that are going on, and that you need to get to the bottom of it.
And one of these days we got to delve into a bunch of Floridian things that are going on. There's a movement to allow 18-year-olds to buy guns. We have the open carry. And
by the way, I thought the sheriff did a good explanation of that the other day. I was glad to hear him say that Publix is fine with people open carry in their stores. I was in there Friday. I didn't see anybody with an open carry, so maybe the word hadn't gotten out to everybody yet, but it'll be interesting. I think as time goes on, we're going to see more and more people open carry. And once they find out where they can go, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's everything from the black bear hunt that's coming on to, let's see, the proposed bill filed in the Florida House to lower the minimum legal age for purchasing all types of firearms from 21 back to 18. They've got all kinds of things that are. The state of Florida has released a dashboard detailing encounters with suspected illegal immigrants that we can go up and look at. Florida lawmakers are considering legislation that would designate October 14th each year as Charlie Kirk Day in remembrance of that. The Florida Education Commissioner has criticized the Alachua County School Board during a public meeting, accusing members of violating constitutional rights and fostering a toxic culture there. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff happening in Florida that we need to talk about.
Wow,
that
one of
other
the big,
people aren't
one of
talking
the big
about.
things in Florida is doing away with the taxes, home taxes,
property taxes.
That's a very big one.
Yeah, we had Ryan Chamberlain on twice talking about this, and he's got a program called Freedom 123, and this is like the flat, as far as I'm concerned, it's like the flat tax. There's great benefits, but there may be great pitfalls there as well. We're tottering on the precipice of something great or something horrible.
Well, when I listened to our speaker last Tuesday, the lady that heads up the services operation, for the
Tanya
county,
Kennedy,
Tanya
yeah.
Kennedy, right, and so on, and she spoke about it, and we've had Raymond McIntyre spoke about it also when we had him, and they both said, okay, doing away with the property taxes is great, but where does the state get the money then to go forward to support what they have to do? And so what is that? What kind of penalty financially is that going to look like? Okay, and so on. So yes,
It reminds me very much of our dear friend, the late John Drennan, who would come on and say, "Throw them all out, throw them all out." I said, "Okay, John, okay, let's throw. Who are you going to throw in?"
right. Yep.
Well, that was another question, you
Yep,
know?
yep.
I mean, throwing them all out or doing away with the problem, that's only half the problem. And I would hope that they can do what we've seen the Trump administration do, is now they are getting rid of federal workers. They're reducing the union there, and they are going to make government more efficient with fewer people. If they have less money, maybe they will do fewer things.
Right. Well, the other thing too about the property taxes, I wonder if it wouldn't have been a little bit smoother road to travel if you would have said we're going to cut property taxes by 50%.
I think that's the way it's going to move.
And then put a 10-year situation where, okay, in 10 years we're going to determine how we can do away with the other 50%.
That's basically Freedom 123 begins to lower, be giving more and more exemptions to people, so they pay fewer and fewer taxes.
Right.
And it's kind of the Jenny Craig method. You eat less and less, and suddenly you're losing weight. You know, so hey, I'm sorry, we don't have the money to. I think that one thing the government does not need to be involved with is housing at all. Okay, and they need to get out of the housing business totally. You know, and I'm sorry, we don't have enough money to run a housing program anymore.
One of the things, though, that we have to, and that was on that survey, one of the things we have to concern ourselves with, though, and I look at it, you look at it. I bought my first house for $29,000. I don't know what you bought your first house for. Those days are gone.
Oh, yeah.
But when you throw something in front of young people today and say, okay, here's your starter home, $250,000. You got to have 20% down. Where are you going to get the 20% from? Okay? So my concern is the government has to work in unison with, other people to determine how we can get affordable housing available for the people. They still have to buy it, but how do we get it down to where it's affordable? Can you not build a house for $100,000 and make it affordable as a starter house? I believe it can be done.
Yeah, and we used to have this back in the 50s and the 60s. You may remember this term, prefab. Prefab homes.
Yep.
I dated a girl at one point whose house was, you would walk up and look at it, and it looked like any site-built home you ever saw. Okay? But it was prefab. They went in, the dad went with the mom, and they said, this is what we want, and they figured out the rooms, okay, that they wanted to have, and so It came not exactly in a box, but basically it came in a box, and they came and the workers came, they poured the footers and assembled it and put the roof on top, and there it was.
Yep.
It was a prefab house. They can do that now.
I think they
if
can.
they want.
And I'll tell you, going back even further in time than that, is the Sears houses.
Yes.
You used to be able to buy a house from the Sears catalog.
It was basically the same thing.
It was a prefab house.
Yes.
In Erie, there's a stretch on, I think it's 38th Street, I believe. There's a stretch where there were nothing built but Sears houses, and they're still there today.
There was one here that they tore down, and we salvaged some chair rail from it and put it in my house in Sebring. We salvaged that and put it up, and it was Sears. They don't know that that's what it is, but that's what it was.
I think that could happen again today, and I'll tell you the guy who I think could make it happen, Elon Musk. He
Yes.
could start, and I'm telling you, with his technology and his, with his brain power, he could start a company that would make prefab houses that you could sell to the public and get installed for $100,000.
With 3D printers. There's
Yes.
there's one system now that has they put these forms up, and they squirt concrete in it. It looks like a big ice cream nozzle, and they squirt concrete in it. They peel away the forms, and you've got your walls. So I think that in time that will happen. There are forces that we know that don't want you to own a house.
No.
And they're going to try to do everything they can to make sure you don't own a house.
Yes.
And so it's going to be up to us to build a better mousetrap.
But I would like to see during Trump's term this time, I would like him to unleash some kind of an affordable housing done by some entrepreneur, and I'm picking Elon Musk for it. I don't think he has anything else to do, so I think he could take on this one, all right, and determine, all right, guys, I want you to go out there and design me an $100,000 house that people can afford to buy.
Tell us what you think. Put it in the comments below. We'd love to know your opinions on all this stuff and more. And yes, we are going to set up a time pretty soon when we meet and have a live show where you can call in. Okay, that's one thing they really want. But we're out of time for today. You've been listening to the Barry Foster Show, recorded at the Ridge Floor Studios in the City of Charm, beautiful downtown Avon Park. Any thoughts, ideas, or suggestions you have, just put them in the comments below, or you can drop us a line at thebarryfostershow@gmail.com. Check out the YouTube page daily, as we'll be putting up new programming here on a regular basis, and subscribe to our YouTube page and join the pages of the Barry Foster Show on Facebook and Instagram. As we continue to look for truth, justice, and the American way, Barry Foster and John Larsen, and we'll see you next time.